I spent 3 long years as Suwan's kept house husband, living large every single day on her unlimited black card. The entire internet labeled me the ultimate gold-digging leech for 3 years. I burned through my wife's fortune on luxury supercars and elite watches, existing as a total failure in the eyes of everyone. No job, no career, no ambition. My sole daily objective was swiping her card on mindless shopping sprees, becoming the most pathetic spineless joke in the capital. I honestly believed I could keep coasting through this brain-dead life forever. Until that day when my entire world came crashing down. The Metropolitan Group was hit by a vicious short-selling attack, and their capital chain snapped completely. $1 billion market value vanished overnight, leaving ghost towns, shuttered factories, betrayal from every business partner, and creditors banging down the door. Once an untouchable legend, the business queen fell from her throne into the abyss in a single night. Her mansion, supercars, and bank accounts were all seized and frozen. She plummeted from the clouds straight into the dirt. The moment the news broke, the internet exploded with mockery, and the ones laughing the loudest were all aiming their venom at me. Suwan is totally bankrupt now. That leech of a husband will definitely be the first to bail. He's been living off her for 3 years, and now the gravy train has hit a brick wall. If he doesn't run, he'll be starving on the streets. Men like him who only know how to spend are the most unreliable. I heard every single word while sitting in my Bugatti. Truth is, I'm an imposter. Just an hour ago, I was an engineer recovering in a hospital bed. The next second, an unseen force dragged me into the shell of a man. The original host was a fool who lost a treasure out of sheer stupidity. The obsession reclamation system judged it a failure and kicked his soul out of this reality. Now I'm the one left to clean up his mess. The cold mechanical voice still echoes in my mind. Mission bound within 1 year assists Suwan in rebuilding her billion-dollar commercial empire. Penalty for failure, permanent entrapment in this world, where your soul will fuse with the original host's residual consciousness. Trapped forever in a fusion? Okay. How is that any different from being dead? I stared up at the leather ceiling of the Bugatti, with only one thought in mind if I ever want to return home. I have to make sure this woman wins. I'm stuck cleaning up this colossal mess whether I like it or not. A multi-billion-dollar goal in just 1 year. This insane mission is definitely trying to screw me over. The system is basically forcing me to rebuild from zero. Listening to the toxic gossip swirling around me, I cursed the original host. He really was a piece of work. Every thread on his back and every bite he took was on his wife's dime. Possessing nothing but a handsome face and pale skin, he totally deserved to be dragged as a pathetic pretty boy leech. I stepped into the cramped 60 square meter apartment Suwan rented. The moment I opened the door, my heart sank into my gut. A wave of shabby, desolate air washed over me, making my skin crawl with discomfort. There was no grand foyer, no crystal chandeliers, and not a shred of the luxury from her former 1,000 square meter villa. The walls were stained and peeling, the floorboards ancient and worn. The second I tried to sit down, the dilapidated sofa let out a sharp metallic groan, the kind of sound that makes your skin shiver. The entire place was an absolute disaster zone. Stacked in the corner were over 100 brand new factory-sealed Rolex watches, all of them hoardings that the original scumbag host had prepared for his planned getaway. The coffee table was buried under a thick layer of dust. The floors were a dull, depressing gray, and the corners were caked with years of grime. Everywhere I looked, it was pure, unadulterated misery. I stood there in the center of the room, feeling a wave of bitterness and sorrow, suffocating my chest. Thinking about all the trashy things the host did before, I felt a mix of pure rage and exhaustion. Just how heartless was the original guy, to turn a blind eye to someone who treated him so well. I took a deep, steadying breath, suppressing the complex swirl of emotions in my heart. I grabbed a mop and started working, scrubbing that rental unit piece by piece, until it actually looked like a place a human could live in. Once finished, I pushed open the door to Suwan's bedroom. Inside, there was only a simple writing desk, a single bookshelf, and a solitary bed. The former CEO, who once commanded a massive estate, she was raised as a pampered princess since birth. Yet now she's forced to endure such crushing hardship. But even after going bankrupt, she never kicked me out. She still allowed me to take refuge here, without uttering a single word of blame. I surveyed the desolate, empty apartment, then headed downstairs to the market for essentials. Opening my wallet, I found only a measly $500 left, barely enough to scrape by for a while. Recalling the specific brands and styles she preferred, I purchased everything and hauled it back. By the time I returned, the sky had turned pitch black, and my stomach was growling with hunger. The refrigerator was completely barren. She's been so overwhelmed, she hasn't had a second to cook. I ended up ordering a simple lamb chop rice bowl. Just then, the door creaked open. Su Wanling was finally home. I looked up at her, and she was still breathtakingly beautiful. Those ethereal, shimmering eyes stared back at me with a cold, expressionless gaze. But as her eyes swept over the spotless, organized room, her expression flickered with visible surprise. "Do you still have enough money for the cleaning service?" I averted my gaze, feeling a twinge of guilt, my fingers tightening around the takeout box. Faced with her innate, bone-deep elegance, the imposter felt a wave of genuine nerves, as if my every secret was being laid bare before her. I swept it myself. You cleaned this. Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. Must have been hard on you. No, not at all. You don't need to apologize to me. As a husband, I've never fulfilled a single responsibility. Why on earth was she the one apologizing to me? I truly couldn't fathom what the original host grandfather had done to convince such a goddess-tier CEO to marry a completely useless, pathetic loser. Su Wanling walked over and sat beside me, pushing a freshly printed divorce agreement gently across the table toward me. The paper felt incredibly thin, yet the weight of it was suffocating. I finished liquidating what assets I could. I only have 50,000 left for you. If you can't find a place, you're welcome to stay here for now. I'll work myself to the bone to compensate you. With 3,000 a month, if that works, just sign it. Chen Yu. I didn't even glance at the agreement, simply sliding it back toward her across the table. The apartment fell into a heavy silence, so quiet I could hear our synchronized breathing. She had already been more than generous with me. Seeing the flickering disappointment in her eyes, I quickly explained, I'm not divorcing you, nor do I want your money. I finally faced reality. I've been a massive burden on you until now, but from here on out, I'll be the breadwinner. Stop putting so much pressure on yourself. No divorce, but just yesterday you said, I cursed the original host under my breath. Yesterday, that idiot was still throwing a tantrum, screaming that she was useless, because she couldn't provide the luxury life he craved, vowing to finalize the divorce the very next day. He had a diamond for a wife and didn't cherish her, too busy dreaming of chasing some other sugar mommy. I had to scramble for an excuse to fix his mess. The fall from grace was too sudden to process. I was drunk and talking nonsense. It wasn't the truth. Now my head is clear. Since we're married, we faced the storm together. When you had money, you spent it on me without hesitation. Now that you've hit rock bottom, there's no way in hell I'm abandoning you. I'll work hard to support myself. And maybe I can even take care of you. Su Wanling let out a faint, weary laugh. Her gaze grew increasingly suspicious, as if she were looking at a total stranger. You don't want to leave. Fine, we'll leave things as they are for now. Whenever you change your mind, just let me know. She stood up and headed toward the bathroom, freezing momentarily the second she pushed open the door. Inside the previously bare and empty bathroom, all of her favorite toiletries had been neatly arranged. She looked stunned for a heartbeat before stepping inside to wash up. When she finally emerged, she looked at me and whispered, Thanks, you should sleep too. I scratched my head sheepishly, quickly finishing my own nightly routine. Returning to my room, I immediately set up a shop on the reselling app, ready to liquidate that entire stash of Rolexes. Once everything was finally settled, I collapsed onto the bed, knowing I had to rise early for the market run. 6 a.m. sharp, the greasy scent of breakfast stalls drifted through the old complex. I bolted upright from the stiff wooden bed. There was no plush latex mattress here, no aroma of freshly ground artisan coffee, just a punishingly hard set of bed slats, and the shrill honking of electric scooters outside. I massaged my throbbing temples, the disorientation of this transmigration still clinging to me. Suddenly, that icy system notification rang out in my mind again. Time limit 1 year. Objective rebuild a billion-dollar commercial empire. Failure permanent entrapment. Give me a break. A multi-billion-dollar target. No cheat codes, no overpowered system perks. Just a stash of unopened Rolexes as my starting loot, and a beautiful exhausted wife who just lost everything. This start is even more brutal than hell mode. I stopped overthinking and moved. The fridge was a barren wasteland, so I immediately headed out to grab groceries. Back home, I strapped on a cheap $9.90 apron and fired up the stove. The gas burner let out a harsh metallic hiss, and the water in the pot was soon at a rolling boil. I whipped up 2 bowls of egg noodles with soft poached eggs, finishing them with a few drops of fragrant sesame oil. Simple yet steaming and hearty. Just as I set the bowls on the table, the bedroom door creaked open. Su Wanling emerged in a faded white button-down, her long hair cascading loosely over her shoulders. Even without a drop of makeup, she lost the sharp edge of a CEO and gained a touch of fragile, haunting beauty. She clearly didn't expect me to be up at the crack of dawn, let alone find the kitchen filled with the aroma of a home-cooked meal. Her stunning eyes were filled with utter bewilderment. I felt a bit self-conscious under her intense gaze, so I slid a bowl toward her. You're up, eat while it's hot. Freshly made egg noodles. She stood rooted to the spot for a long moment, staring down at the steaming bowl of noodles, then back at the apron tied around my waist. Her voice trembled with a slight rasp. You cooked this. Who else? I chuckled softly. I can't let you live on takeout forever, especially with how exhausted you have been lately. Eating something hot will make you feel better. She sat down in contemplative silence, picking up her chopsticks to take small, delicate bites. 3 years of marriage. She had supported me for 3 whole years, providing the cash, the cars, and every luxury my heart desired. Yet she never received a single word of genuine care. The sins committed by the original host are debts that I must finally repay. Take it slow. There's more if you're still hungry, I muttered. Right at that moment, bam bam, bang! A series of urgent, arrogant thuds erupted at the door, shattering the fragile peace of the room. I knit my brows in annoyance. Who would be this incredibly rude in a place like this? The former princess eating noodles suddenly stiffened, her expression darkening instantly. I stood up and strode toward the entrance. As soon as I pulled the door open, I was met by a woman caked in heavy makeup. She was draped in gaudy designer labels, stinking of pungent, suffocating perfume, looking perfectly polished, yet radiating an insufferable, aggressive arrogance. It was Liu Xiaoyi, the rich woman the original host was obsessing over just yesterday. She had money, sure, but compared to the old Su Wanling, she wasn't even in the same league. The moment she saw me, Liu Xiaoyi's eyes lit up. She scanned me from head to toe, her tone flippant and smug. Chen Yu. I heard Su Wanling finally went completely bust. I specifically came here to pick you up. She leaned in close to me, her sharp nails tracing a slow line down my arm. She whispered suggestively, "What future is there staying with a bankrupt loser? Just come with me, and I'll keep you. The cash, the cars, the brands, I'll give you everything. You'll be even more legendary than when she was in power." She spoke with blunt, shameless honesty, not even bothering to hide her true motives. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Su Wanling's fingers, which were still gripping her chopsticks, suddenly clenched with immense force, her knuckles turning deathly white. Her expression drained of warmth bit by bit. Liu Xiaoyi's disgusting attitude was making my skin crawl. But what really made my blood boil was Su Wanling standing behind me utterly silent, her knuckles bleached white from the tension. She's someone with pride etched into her very bones. She shouldn't have to endure this kind of disrespect. She's already lost everything. If I abandoned her now, it would destroy her spirit. A surge of protective rage rushed to my head. People can mock me or look down on me all they want, but I won't let anyone bully her like this. I stepped forward, planting myself firmly, and spoke ice cold, "You've got the wrong house. I'm not going anywhere with you, and I sure as hell don't need a sugar mommy. Su Wanling is my wife, and I'm staying right here by her side." The smug smirk on Liu Xiaoyi's face instantly stiffened. Clearly stunned by the rejection, she let out a shrill sneer, dismissively scanning the dilapidated rental apartment. "Chen Yu, don't be a fool and blow this chance. Su Wanling is nothing but a penniless loser now. Why are you still hovering around her like a dog? You actually plan on suffering for the rest of your life. Just give me the word and I'll get lost." I cut her off with a frigid glare. My voice wasn't loud, yet it carried a terrifying weight of authority. "My business is none of your concern. If you ever dare to harass us again, don't blame me for getting violent." Well, with that final warning, I slammed the door right in her face with a thunderous bang. Liu Xiaoyi's muffled screams of fury echoed through the wood, shrill, pathetic, and desperate. Inside, the silence was absolute. I turned around and locked eyes with Su Wanling, who was staring directly at me. She looked at me, her eyes swirling with a mix of shock and utter disbelief. Meeting her gaze, I spoke in a calm but unwavering tone. "Ignore her. Let's eat. The noodles are getting cold." Su Wanling didn't say a word. She simply gave a soft nod and picked up her chopsticks again. After clearing the table, I prepared to head out. As she left, she whispered, "I won't be back until late." As I left, I murmured, "I'll be back very late. Don't wait up for me. Go ahead and eat." I finished cleaning the dishes, my gaze drifting toward that bulging cardboard box in the corner. Inside were the fruits of the original host, 3-year shopping spree over 100 Rolex watches, brand new and factory sealed. They used to be his pathetic tools for flexing, but now they were my only liquid capital to start over. I knelt down and ripped the box open, randomly pulling out a sleek Submariner model to list immediately on the reselling app. I set the price 10% below market value, aiming for the fastest possible turnover. According to my rough calculations, selling them all would net over $1 million, enough to provide Su Wanling with some seed money. But even that was far from sufficient. I looked out the window at the Bugatti Veyron parked below. The original host had shamelessly nagged Su Wanling into buying it. Aside from showing off, the car was utterly useless. But at this moment, it was my biggest hope for lightening her financial burden. Without a moment of hesitation, I dug up a luxury used car dealer's contact and dialed him directly. "Young Master Chen, what brings you to my line today? Are you buying my Bugatti?" I cut straight to the chase. "Come inspect it immediately. I need the full payment cleared today. I'll take a slight hit on the price, as long as it's fast." The dealer hesitated, his voice trembling with sudden excitement. "Are you serious, young master? I'll be there in 10 minutes. I hung up the phone. I stared down at the supercar, feeling absolutely no emotional attachment to it. This status symbol was just a piece of junk, compared to the mountain of debt she was facing. The dealer arrived in a frantic rush shortly after. Inspection and paperwork took less than an hour. A notification popped up, $5 million paid in full. I wouldn't keep a single cent for myself. Every penny was going to her. Compared to $1 billion empire, it was pocket change. But for us in our current situation, It was the most solid foundation we could ask for. By the time I finished the logistics, the sky had begun to fade into twilight. The car payment had already cleared, and most of the watches on the app were sold. I can have everything shipped by tomorrow. But I know Su Wanling is fiercely proud and stubborn. If I just hand her the cash directly, she'll undoubtedly shut me down without hesitation. I kept quiet and headed back into the kitchen. I recalled how she skipped dinner for years, leaving her stomach in absolute shambles. Since she had noodles earlier today, anything heavy tonight would be torture for her. I rinsed some millet, sliced up some fresh Chinese yam, and let the porridge simmer slowly over a low flame. Perfectly balanced, not too thick, not too thin. The ultimate comfort food to heal her gut. It was exactly what she needed. The delicate aroma of cooked rice soon filled the apartment. At 7:30 p.m., the lock clicked. Su Wanling was home. She looked utterly drained, her face even paler than it had been this morning. Her lips were completely bloodless, clear proof she'd been pushing herself to the limit all day. The moment she caught the scent of the food, she froze in a daze. "Are you making porridge?" Her voice was barely a whisper, cracking with a hint of hoarseness. "Yeah." I set the bowl down in front of her. "Your stomach is sensitive. Stop letting it stay empty." She stood rooted to the spot, instinctively declining. "I don't eat at night. This isn't a meal." I placed the warm bowl directly before her, my tone calm and steady. "It's medicine for your stomach. Just have half a bowl." She stared at the warm porridge, then back at me, remaining silent for a long time. Finally, she picked up the spoon, taking small, cautious sips. She ate slowly, but she didn't push it away again. The room was peaceful, save for the soft clinking of the spoon against the ceramic. I didn't grill her about the company's status. No questions about creditors, or the hardships she was facing. You wouldn't understand even if I told you, she'd think. Better to keep quiet. Probing into certain wounds only makes the pain more visible. Once she set the spoon down, only then did I gently slide that bank card toward the corner of the table. "There's 5 million in here." My voice was barely above a whisper. "I sold the Bugatti." She immediately moved to shove the card back toward me. "Keep it for yourself. This isn't for you to spend on luxuries. It's for you to settle your debts." I pressed my hand down on hers, the pressure light, yet unwavering. "You're the one who bought that car. I drove it for free for 3 years, and selling it now to help fill your deficit isn't charity. It's what's right." Her lips were pressed into a tight line. She'd been a warrior her whole life, and now she couldn't even find the words to argue. "Take it." I nudged the card a bit closer. "You don't need to feel like you owe me. Just consider this as me paying back a fraction of everything I consumed of yours over the last 3 years. She gazed at me, emotion swirling violently in the depths of her eyes, yet she remained enveloped in silence. Pride, stubbornness, humiliation, and a flicker of reluctant touched emotion all played across her face. I didn't push her further, getting up to clear the dishes instead. "If it truly makes you feel uncomfortable, then just consider it a loan. When you stage your comeback, you can pay me back with interest." She didn't respond, but she didn't try to push the card back again either. I set a glass of warm water by her hand. "Get some rest early. I'll have breakfast ready for you again tomorrow morning." She let out a faint soft hum, a sound so delicate it melted into the night air, before retreating into my room. I glanced back. She was sitting there alone under the dim light, her shoulders finally losing that rigid defensive tension. I crept toward my own room on tiptoe, careful not to disturb the moment. I left only a single nightlight glowing in the living room, its amber hue soft and unobtrusive. Not long after, the master bedroom door clicked shut, though the light inside remained burning bright. She was definitely burning the midnight oil to deal with that disaster, auditing accounts, negotiating with creditors, and trying to pacify her restless employees. Every single task from salvage operations to negotiating with creditors was enough to crush a person. Once she had the entire Sioux Corporation backing her, now she stands completely alone. Not long after, I heard a faint movement from the adjacent room. The scrape of a chair was followed by a sharp, stifled groan. It was brief, but enough for me to realize her stomach was acting up again. I hesitated for 2 seconds, then gave the door a light, cautious tap, without waiting for an answer. I slowly pushed the door open just a crack. The only light came from a small lamp by the bedside. Su Wanling was hunched over, one hand clutching her stomach, her brow furrowed in pain. The moment she saw me enter, she instinctively straightened her back, pretending that everything was fine. I didn't call her out on it. Standing by the doorway, I said, "There's stomach medicine in the drawer. I picked it up with the groceries." "I see," she replied. I placed a glass of warm water on the nightstand, then took a step back, maintaining a distance that wouldn't make her feel crowded. She didn't chase me out, nor did she say anything else. It was a silent acknowledgement. I gently closed the door behind me. The exact moment the latch clicked shut, I heard the crisp rattle of pills being shaken from a bottle. That night, the light in her room burned until the early hours. The next morning, I woke up even before my alarm went off, afraid of disturbing her. I finished washing up as quietly as possible, then headed downstairs for fresh millet, some pumpkin, and green vegetables. Back in the rental unit, I let the pot simmer over a low flame, brewing a pot of warm gut-healing porridge. Just as the porridge was finishing, her bedroom door creaked open. Wanling had changed into a simple clean outfit, her hair tied up casually, looking slightly better than before, though a faint trace of exhaustion still lingered beneath her eyes. As the aroma hit her, her gaze instinctively drifted toward the kitchen. Before I could even speak, she whispered softly, "Sorry for troubling you again." "It's no trouble at all," I said, as I carefully ladled out the porridge. "Eat up. Cold food is bad for your recovery." She nodded, taking her seat at the small table. The awkwardness of yesterday had vanished, replaced by a lack of forced distance, as if she had already grown accustomed to these quiet mornings. We finished our breakfast in a comfortable silence. Neither of us mentioned her late-night stomach pains, nor did we bring up that $5 million card. I understood her silent acceptance. Some things are best left unsaid, as keeping that distance is the ultimate form of respect. Midway through the meal, she suddenly spoke in a low, gentle voice. "I'll be heading back quite early this afternoon. There are some urgent matters I need to handle from home. I'll whip up some proper dishes for dinner tonight." She glanced up at me for a fleeting second, her eyes shimmering with a hint of surprise. It was clear she found it hard to believe that a man like me, who used to avoid the kitchen at all costs, actually knew his way around the stove. The moment she stepped out, I dragged out that crate of Rolexes to begin the packing process, labeling boxes and filling out addresses. I worked in total focused silence. In this life, actions carry far more weight than empty promises. Once every single watch was securely packed, I sent a quick message to the courier. Pickup scheduled for 5 p.m. The timing was perfectly synced with her expected return. As evening approached, the door lock clicked with a soft metallic sound. Su Wanling had returned the moment she stepped inside. Her gaze immediately landed on the corner of the living room, where a mountain of neatly stacked parcels sat waiting. She blinked in genuine confusion, just getting rid of some stuff and shipping them out. I kept my tone casual and nonchalant, as if I were discussing the most mundane chore imaginable. She didn't pry into what was inside the boxes, nor did she ask about the total profit. She simply stared at the pile of packages, a flicker of emotion dancing in her eyes. After a long pause of contemplation, she let out a soft "oh" before asking, "Why sell your watches?" "I've got my eye on some new models lately, so I decided these old ones weren't worth keeping anymore." I couldn't exactly tell her I was raising her startup capital. With her iron pride, she'd definitely refuse. However, before she could utter a word, her phone suddenly vibrated. It was a call from her secretary, Wang Yu. She moved to the window to answer, keeping her voice relatively low. Yet I caught enough fragments to understand the context. "President Su, should I cancel tonight's business banquet?" "No need, I won't be heading out tonight." "In that case, regarding dinner, I'm heading home. Someone is cooking for me. He handled breakfast this morning too." "Mr. Chen? Cooked?" "Yes." The secretary went silent on the other end, for a long moment before whispering, "Mr. Chen really has changed, hasn't he? Brewing porridge in the morning was already a miracle, but I never imagined he'd actually prepare dinner." I let out a faint smile, turning back into the kitchen to get to work, slicing vegetables and tossing them into the searing wok. My movements were deliberate and steady, as the steam and sizzle filled the air. The tiny kitchen was gradually enveloped in a mouth-watering aroma. Before long, 2 dishes and a soup were ready. I killed the flame, setting them on the old dining table. Dinner served. Su Wanling finally lifted her head from the desk, letting out a soft acknowledging hum. She stood up and walked over to take her seat. There was no elaborate plating or fancy garnish, just the most basic homestyle comfort food. Yet as she stared at the meal before her, her gaze visibly lingered for a moment. We ate in a comfortable, quiet rhythm, lacking any forced conversation or awkward tension. I occasionally glanced up to see her taking small bites. She looked significantly more relaxed than yesterday. Once finished, I stacked the bowls and chopsticks, standing up to head for the kitchen. "I'll do those. I've got it covered. Go take a break." I kept my tone flat, leaving her no room for polite refusal. Her hand froze in mid-air for a second, before she slowly retracted it without further insistence. I twisted the faucet open, the water rushing out with a rhythmic splash, scrubbing the bowls, wiping the pans, cleaning the countertops. I tidied the kitchen with quiet, efficient precision. By the time I dried my hands and stepped out of the kitchen, she had already retreated to her desk, buried deep in work behind her laptop screen. Only 2 distinct sounds filled the living room: the rhythmic, delicate clicking of her keyboard, and the subtle rustle of me tidying up the space. Once I had everything organized and in its place, I stole a quiet glance at her. She remained fixated on the monitor, never turning back, her profile tracing a sharp, elegant silhouette. That refined air from her days of luxury was still there, though she'd lost that aggressive corporate edge, replaced by a softer, weary sort of grace. The dim light caught the bridge of her perfect nose. Her lips were pale, yet her beauty remained undeniable. Her frame was naturally slender, but after days of working around the clock, her shoulders looked even more fragile. Yet she kept her spine as straight as an arrow. Even trapped within this dilapidated rental unit, She couldn't hide the innate nobility and pride etched into her soul. Her long hair was gathered casually at the back, with a few stray strands clinging to the curve of her neck. Looking peaceful yet incredibly vulnerable, her long porcelain fingers danced across the keys with light, rapid precision, her fingertips turning white from the sheer intensity of her focus, despite being buried under a mountain of corporate wreckage. Even her frown was restrained and subtle. Her stubborn resilience was enough to steady one's heart, yet it was also utterly heartbreaking to witness. I didn't dare move forward to disturb her, simply observing her in silence for a moment. She didn't look back, but she seemed to sense my presence. Her fingers faltered for a mere fraction of a second, before she resumed typing the next line of code. I retreated to my own bedroom, closing the door with the gentlest of touches. I have to find a way to stack cash and lighten her load. I've decided to return to my old roots: drone research, development, and high-end repair. In my past life, I relied on this very expertise to master every facet of the low-altitude industry, from core component repairs to full-scale custom mods, aerial mapping, and industrial inspection solutions. I was a master of them all. In this world where I have no system and no magical cheat codes to bail me out, this technical mastery is the only real power I have. I pulled out my chair and sat down. I flipped open my laptop, logging into the local industrial equipment forums, drone enthusiast communities, and professional repair platforms. I registered my handles, polished my professional profile, and listed my specialized repair, upgrading, debugging, and custom modification services. I set the pricing at a strategic middle ground, compelling enough to hook clients in a desperate rush, yet high enough to respect the caliber of my expertise. It didn't take long before a pop-up notification flashed across the screen. A frantic order from an aerial cinematography studio. 2 high-end drones wrecked after a crash, gimbals completely seized up, and motors fried to a crisp. They had a high-stakes shoot scheduled for tomorrow morning, and were willing to pay a premium for an emergency fix. I fired back an immediate acceptance. After arranging to collect the hardware in 30 minutes, I kept my movements as stealthy as possible, stealing a quick glance through the door crack at the living room. Su Wanling was still buried in her work behind the monitor, her brow tightly knit in a look of intense focus. She was likely wrestling with creditors or hostile partners. I didn't understand the details and I didn't pry. I simply chose not to disturb her focus. Instead, I grabbed my keys and my tactical toolkit, softly clicking the front door shut behind me. The stairwell of this ancient complex was dimly lit, the night breeze carrying a sharp, biting chill. I tightened my grip on the heavy repair tools in my hand. The cash from the car and watches could only douse the immediate flames of her burning financial crisis. But to rebuild a billion-dollar empire within a single year, liquidating assets would never be enough to reach the summit. I have to rely on my own technical mastery, starting from the ground up with these basic repair jobs, plunging headfirst into the competitive low-altitude economy, amassing capital from small gigs, and building a legendary reputation through pure skill. That is how I'll construct a brand new foundation for us. The billion-dollar goal is light years away, but every marathon begins with a single calculated step. When I finally lugged the 2 mangled drones back into our cramped rental unit, the living room light was still blazing. Hearing the commotion, Su Wanling looked up from her desk, her eyes landing on the dusty, battered machines in my arms. A flicker of pure confusion crossed her face. "Did you actually pick up some work, Yaing?" I let out a soft chuckle, keeping my tone airy and light, not wanting her to fret. "Just fixing some drones. Trying to scrape together some pocket change." She stared at me with an unreadable intensity, noticing I was no longer draped in expensive designer labels, but wearing a basic tee and worn-out jeans, clutching a pair of mangled machines in my arms. The old arrogant playboy look was completely gone, replaced by the grounded vibe of an honest worker. The man who spent 3 years as a useless freeloading leech was now not only handling the chores and cooking, but actually hustling for repairs in the middle of the night. Her lips parted as if to say something, but she only whispered, "Don't overwork yourself." "Yeah, I won't." I carried the hardware into the guest room, glancing back at her just before closing the door. "You should get some sleep too. Don't stay up until dawn." The door clicked shut behind me. I took my seat at the desk, flicked on the workspace lamp, and loosened the very first screw. The delicate clink of metal against metal rang out with crystalline clarity in the dead of night. Out in the living room, the atmosphere gradually softened. Su Wanling finally fired off her last email and softly closed her laptop. As she stood up, her shoulders were stiff and numb. She raised a hand to massage the back of her neck, the movement lazy yet radiating an effortless allure. She then headed into the bathroom to wash away the day. Soon the rhythmic splash of the shower echoed. Not loud, yet in this tiny apartment it felt impossible to ignore. I sat frozen at my desk in the guest room, my fingers still clutching the precision screwdriver. The intricate drone parts before me had become a blur. My ears were filled with the persistent hum of the water. Images began to flash uncontrollably in my mind. Her cold, composed demeanor during the day contrasted with that breathtaking face and the way her slender neck curved. when she leaned over her work earlier. My Adam's apple bobbed as I swallowed hard. I gave my head a violent shake, forcing my focus back onto the machinery. Now is definitely not the time for those kinds of thoughts. The sound of rushing water felt intoxicating, sending a restless itch through my heart. An eternity seemed to pass, before the splashing finally ceased. The bathroom door creaked open just a sliver, releasing a cloud of steam laced with a floral scent. Su Wanling emerged freshly bathed and radiant, her damp tresses cascading loosely over her shoulders. Stray wet strands clung to her porcelain neck, while her cheeks glowed with a delicate rosy flush. Dressed in simple soft cotton pajamas, with the collar hanging slightly loose, her elegant collarbones were partially revealed. The usually icy and dominant female CEO now appeared as soft and inviting as warm water. She looked up, locking eyes with me instantly, as our gazes collided in that split second. Her ears tinged with a sudden heat, and she instinctively averted her eyes. "Your turn to wash up," she whispered. "The water is still hot." "Got it." I shut the door, met by a wave of lingering warmth. A thin veil of mist coated the mirror, and with one touch of my fingertips, I felt the warmth she had left behind. I twisted the faucet handle to the limit, splashing ice-cold water onto my face, to suppress the rising heat surging through my veins. Yet my mind was hijacked by the image of her, those shimmering, mist-filled eyes, and the faint crimson at the tips of her ears. A 3-year freeloading husband suddenly transforming. Even my heartbeat was beginning to spiral out of control. She was just outside in the living room. My heart thundered against my ribs like a drum. This cramped, dilapidated rental apartment had suddenly become stiflingly hot. I emerged after my shower, still enveloped in a light, damp mist. My pajama collar hung loosely, exposing the sharp line of my Adam's apple. A single amber nightlight glowed in the hall, its dim, soft radiance making the air feel heavy with silence. Su Wanling was leaning back on the sofa, sitting there in the darkness, perfectly still and quiet. Her hair was still half damp, resting softly against her shoulder. The cotton fabric of her sleepwear seemed to soften her entire aura. The sharp edge of the elite CEO had completely vanished, replaced by a fragile softness that made you want to cherish her. As I walked over drying my hair, I noticed her fingers pressed firmly against her stomach, her brow knit in a tight, painful furrow, and her lips so pale they were nearly translucent. When the agony peaked, she'd take a sharp, shallow breath. Yet she refused to let even a single whimper escape. That stubborn pride made my chest tighten with worry. "Is it the pain again?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, to avoid startling her. She lifted her gaze toward me, her eyes still clouded with waves of lingering distress. Yet she instinctively shrank back into the sofa, trying to maintain that protective wall between us. With her signature cold detachment, she muttered, "It's nothing. Just a chronic issue." That subtle subconscious rejection was painful to watch, faint yet undeniably present. I didn't force myself into her space. Instead, I simply turned to the kitchen to pour a glass of perfectly tempered water. I placed the stomach medicine on the coffee table before her, sliding it well within her reach. "Take one. It'll take the edge off." She remained silent as she took the pill, tilting her head back to swallow. Her throat moved slightly as she gulped the water, her movements retaining their natural elegance, though lacking her usual composed confidence. I stood by the side, neither sitting nor speaking further, but not even 30 seconds had passed before she let out a muffled groan, her body uncontrollably curling into a fetal position on the sofa. The abdominal spasms hit her with brutal sudden force, turning her very fingertips white from the strain. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lunged forward, crouching right in front of her. "It's unbearable, isn't it?" She averted her face, desperate to hide her vulnerability from me. Her voice was a strained rasp. I can manage." Before she could finish the sentence, another violent spasm racked her body. She trembled from the impact, unable to even maintain her balance while sitting. I stopped hesitating. I reached out, sliding one hand behind her lower back, while the other moved firmly beneath her knees, preparing to lift her in a bridal carry. The moment I applied pressure, Wanling's entire body jolted with tension, shoving me away with a sudden, startled force, her eyes flashing with blatant defiance and panic. "Don't touch me." Her voice was sharp and jagged, laced with a raw, instinctive defensiveness. Her cheeks burned with a deep flush. It wasn't the glow of romance, but the heat of sheer anxiety and rejection. For 3 years, we had lived as strangers under one roof. She was long accustomed to my distance, and even less prepared for this sudden, intimate proximity. Looking down, I could see the tips of her ears turning crimson, and catch the faint, lingering scent of her body wash. She felt impossibly light and fragile in my arms, unbearably so. I kept my voice softer, grounding it with steady reassurance. "I'm not trying anything. I'm just carrying you to bed so you can lie down. Sitting up like this only makes the cramps worse." She stared at me, her gaze a chaotic storm of resistance and alarm, shot through with a flicker of utter helplessness. She could tell there was no malice in my eyes, yet her physical instincts still prevented her from simply surrendering. We remained in a stalemate for 2 seconds, until another agonizing spasm racked her stomach. leaving her vision blurred and hazy with pain. She finally lost the strength to maintain her iron wall. Seizing the moment her guard faltered, I swiftly yet gently swept her up into a bridal carry. My grip was rock solid, yet I moved with maximum tenderness, ensuring she didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure. Suwanling's body turned to stone, and for a second she tried to struggle, but the slightest movement sent fire through her gut. She could do nothing but clench a corner of my pajama top, turning her face away, refusing to meet my eyes, while the back of her neck burned a feverish red. She stopped fighting me, yet there was no sense of leaning on me for support. She was just a knot of pure tension, like a cornered kitten bristling its fur but too weak to strike. She was repulsed yet utterly lost, holding her close. I moved with agonizing slowness, keeping my stride perfectly level to avoid any discomfort. It was only a few short steps to the bedroom, but I navigated them with extreme caution. As I laid her delicately onto the bed, she instantly retreated toward the headboard, lips pressed into a thin, stubborn line. Yet she didn't voice any further protest. I pulled the thin duvet over her, straightened my back, and proactively stepped back half a pace. Just lie still. I'll grab a hot water bottle for you to use as a compress. It'll make you feel a lot better. She refused to meet my eyes. Her response so faint it was nearly imperceptible, laced with a trace of awkward vulnerability. Fine. The light caught the crimson flush on her ear, a tiny detail radiating an atmosphere of shock and intimacy. I turned and headed straight for the kitchen, filling an old hot water bottle with steaming water, before wrapping it in a protective towel to ensure she wouldn't get burned. When I returned to the bedroom, she had already closed her eyes, though her brow remained tightly furrowed, and her breathing was shallow and erratic. I gently placed the hot water bottle over her stomach, massaging it in slow circular motions through the quilt. Her body gave a microscopic involuntary shudder, but she didn't pull away or open her eyes. Oh, yeah. This should ease the pain, I murmured in a hushed tone. Mm-hmm, she hummed in response, her voice as soft as a whisper. I tucked the corners of the blanket back in, securing the warm compress firmly against her side, making sure it was safe and comfortable. Only then did I retreat on tiptoe toward the door. Sleep well. Call me if you need anything. Lowering my voice to a whisper, I turned and clicked the bedroom door shut. Retreating to the guest room, the world instantly plunged into absolute silence. I sat back down at my workstation. The desk lamp dimmed to its lowest setting, illuminating the gutted drone component sprawled before me. I forcibly suppressed the heat and frantic pulse from earlier, leaving behind nothing but cold, sharp focus. I took a deep, steadying breath, picked up my precision screwdriver again, and centered my concentration on the flight control board, motor diagnostics, gimbal calibration, and firmware reflashing. Frame reinforcement, every single step executed with rapid precision. The night deepened outside the window, the room filled only with the faint clinking of metal and the rhythmic tapping of the keyboard. I lost track of how much time had passed before both drones were finally fully resurrected. Power on test complete, all systems nominal. I stowed away my tools, packed the machines into their cases, and confirmed they'd be ready for morning delivery and payment. With the mission accomplished, I finally let out a long, heavy exhale. That cold, systematic prompt flashed in my mind once more. Time limit 1 year. Rebuild a billion-dollar business empire. I let out a mocking scoff, flicked off the desk lamp, and collapsed onto my hard, stiff bed. Empire or not, I need to survive the here and now first. The master bedroom next door was deathly quiet. She must have finally drifted into a deep sleep. I pushed the intrusive thoughts aside, closed my eyes, and was soon claimed by exhaustion. Not a single sound disturbed the rest of my night. The following morning, I blinked awake just as the first rays of dawn broke. I crept out of bed on tiptoe, moving like a shadow to avoid making a sound. After a quick wash, I headed straight downstairs. The breakfast stalls at the complex gate were already open. I skipped the usual porridge and opted for warm millet cakes, steamed pumpkin sugar-free soy milk, and a basket of light, fresh vegetable buns. Everything was chosen to be gut-friendly, yet substantial. When I returned to the apartment, she was just emerging from the master bedroom. Her hair was tied back in its usual simple style, her face completely bare of makeup, wearing that same mask of cool, detached composure. Her emotions were locked away tight, leaving no trace of the vulnerability from last night. She spotted the breakfast bags in my hand, her gaze faltering for a split second. No shock, no grand gestures, just a flicker of recognition. Here, eat something before you head to the office. I laid out the spread across the table. She walked over, sat down in silence, and began slowly nibbling on a piece of millet cake. Not a single word was exchanged. The atmosphere remained predictably calm, fitting the rhythm of our recent interactions. Yet I could tell she was eating more earnestly than usual, each bite deliberate and steady, with no pretense and no attempt to decline. This was her unique way of accepting my help, a silent show of gratitude hidden beneath her icy exterior. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused yesterday. It took me a second to realize she was referring to her stomach. From the night before, I offered a faint smile, keeping the vibe casual. It's nothing. Just doing what I should? She didn't follow up, simply lowering her head to continue eating. the tips of her ears flushing a microscopic shade of pink. It was so faint it was nearly invisible. There was no forced romance, no sudden heartbeat, just a raw, deeply restrained sense of appreciation. Once finished, she grabbed her bag and gave her usual detached farewell. I'm heading to work. Right, drive safe. She reached the door, her footsteps faltering for a heartbeat. She didn't turn back, letting out only a soft acknowledging, The door clicked shut behind her, and the apartment plunged back into silence. I cleared the table and tidied the space, my gaze drifting toward the guest room, at the two fully resurrected drones. Today, I'd finally pocket my first batch of repair cash. After wiping down the dining table, I carefully packed the fixed machines into my gear bag. Once everything was double-checked, I headed out. The morning air carried a crisp, refreshing chill, and the complex was sparsely populated. I maintained a brisk pace toward the rendezvous point, at the designated aerial cinematography studio. The client was already there, pacing in anticipation. Seeing the machines restored to factory condition, they ran a flight test. The gimbal was butter smooth. The motors hummed quietly, and not a single trace of the previous wreck remained. Man, you're the real deal. This speed, this craftsmanship, it's insane. The manager authorized the transfer on the spot, tossing in an extra $200 as a rush job bonus. My phone buzzed with the notification. $1,700 successfully deposited. It wasn't a fortune, but in this world, it was the very first sum I'd earned with my own 2 hands. I gripped my phone tightly, feeling a surge of genuine relief, with no orders scheduled for the morning. I sprawled out on the bed and flipped open my laptop. Deep within the original owner's files was a folder, labeled 1-to-1. Driven by curiosity, I clicked it open. Inside, there was only a single document. No title, no header. Just massive blocks of raw, unfiltered text. It looked like a collection of adolescent musings typed out on a whim, with chaotic paragraphs and zero formatting. As I began to scroll through the lines, my heart gradually sank into my chest. Today is the first day of high school. I'm seated right next to her. Her name is Soo-won Lynx, the quietest girl in the entire class. She dresses impeccably, sits with perfect posture, and refuses to speak to a single soul. Her gaze is as cold as frosted glass in midwinter. The teacher mentioned she's the top-ranking student in the city, born into a wealthy elite family. Everyone is too intimidated to even approach her. I stared at the glowing screen, my fingers momentarily frozen. So their story didn't actually start as adults, forced into an arranged union by their elders. It turns out they've known each other since the very beginning. Back then, my grades weren't half bad either. I was actually at the top of my game. I was just much louder and more restless than she was, always joking and making a scene. Sitting beside her, I thought she was way too boring. Everyone else was scared to talk to her, but not me. I'd pester her about homework gossip about teachers, and ask where she was studying over the weekend. She was a woman of few words, mostly just listening, but a rare 2-word reply from her could make my entire day. To be honest, the moment I first saw her, I couldn't look away. It wasn't just because of her stunning looks. It was how she was so proud, yet never arrogant. She excelled in the humanities, and she was no slouch in the sciences either. My strength was in STEM, especially physics. Together, we were the most unstoppable duo in class. While others struggled through problems, grinding through problems was our way of clashing. She refused to back down, and I refused to yield. As we competed, our rankings skyrocketed together. People called her icy and unapproachable, but I knew she just wasn't used to speaking first. She never ate breakfast, so I'd bring an extra portion when her notes were missing details. I'd silently slide mine over to her. When people gossiped about her behind her back, I'd shut them down instantly. The whole class knew I treated her differently. She wasn't oblivious to it. She just never broke the barrier. Before the final exams, I joked with her. We're definitely ending up at the same university. She looked up at me and spoke a full sentence for the very first time. Let's see who scores higher then. Because of those words, I pushed myself harder than ever before. It wasn't for the prestige. I just wanted to keep being by her side. The day the results were posted, I stared at our nearly identical scores. The same university. The same city. I almost burst out laughing right there in the hallway. Back then, I truly believed that we would keep walking this path forever. Same desk, same school, same road, same future. The text ends abruptly here. Everything following it is a complete void. No more entries, no conclusion. I sat before the screen in a long, heavy silence. So the original owner was never actually a loser. In his youth, he was a top-tier student, brilliant, radiant, and bold. His entire world revolved around Soo-won Ling. He was someone who could stand at the summit right beside her. He wasn't unworthy. He wasn't beneath her. He was once just as exceptional as she was. At what point did everything fall apart? How did that proud shining boy transform into a decadent wasteful and mocked trophy husband everyone despised? Was it a family tragedy? Was it the crushing weight of reality? Or did that subsequent marriage grind their shared dreams into a cycle of self-destruction? As I continued scrolling down, I stumbled upon a hidden block of text. Every line was drenched in a profound sense of despair. Not long after university started, I confessed my feelings under the dim stadium lights. I clutched those flowers, my voice trembling with nerves. She didn't accept immediately, but she didn't reject me either. She just watched me, her eyes clear and unwavering. I thought our union was a natural certainty, until Liu Xiaoyi appeared. He was born into extreme wealth, throwing money around like it was nothing. Every word he spoke served as a brutal reminder of the chasm between Su Wanling and me. He told me I was unworthy of standing at the peak with her, that without a fortune, I didn't even have the right to be near her. Those words were like needles piercing me until I couldn't breathe. I spiraled into a panic, becoming obsessively convinced that only money could make me her equal, that only wealth could keep her by my side. I became blinded by short-term gains, turning anxious, bitter, and twisted. The tighter I tried to grasp things, the faster they slipped away. Eventually, I just gave up and embraced the void, numbing myself through reckless extravagance and masking my deep inferiority with the cold facade. I became the leech that everyone looked down upon. I threw away my pride, forgot our original promise to stand together, and pushed the person I loved most further and further away. I was wrong, catastrophically wrong. If I could do it all over again, I would never let such absurdity destroy every possibility we ever had. And there at the very end of the text, in the most obscure hidden corner, with a gentle click of my mouse, an old deeply buried photo popped up. The resolution was grainy and low, captured on a mobile phone from years ago. The backdrop was the bleachers of a high school field, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of soft orange. A young Chen Yu was wearing a baggy school uniform, grinning with a bold, radiant confidence, with his arm draped casually over Su Wanling's shoulder. His eyes were ablaze as if they held the radiance of the stars, while Su Wanling stood by his side, making no move to pull away. This entry was written a month later, the digital page looking as if it had been stained by tears. As I reached the very last line, my fingertips tightened instinctively, and I softly closed the document. The heart-pounding connection of their youth and the burning passion of that confession had ultimately been crushed into dust by reality and obsession. The boy who once stood as her equal ended up becoming the very version of himself he loathed most. It's glaringly obvious that Liu Xiaoyi targeted them out of pure spite. They were the perfect power couple, so he used the most despicable tactics to tear them apart. Perhaps my transmigration here is meant to settle the score, to mend the regrets the original owner left behind. I stared at the now darkened computer screen, feeling a sharp pang of sympathy in my chest. Who would have guessed that the old Chen Yu was never a loser? In college, he was a hardcore drone engineering major, while Su Wanling mastered the world of finance. One was a tech genius building the future, the other a strategist controlling the global market. They were a top-tier match made in heaven, yet reality had cruelly ripped them asunder. Differing career paths drove them further apart. And then came Liu Xiaoyi's poisonous manipulation. Without money, how could you ever be worthy of her? Stop living in a fantasy world. That single soul-crushing sentence was enough to break the spirited top student idol, turning him into the decadent, unmotivated, and pathetic freeloader he eventually became. It wasn't that he lacked talent. He was gaslighted by his own poverty into self-abandonment. I didn't let a sudden rush of adrenaline cloud my judgment. Instead, I slowly moved the cursor, opening up various industry portals one by one, quietly gathering every scrap of information. Low-altitude economy, industrial-grade drones, inspection projects, custom modifications and repairs. I analyzed supply chain prices piece by piece, committing every detail to memory. The professional expertise the original owner had discarded was now being reclaimed and sharpened by me. This isn't just some impulsive rebound story. This is a cold, calculated plan to finish the path he abandoned. One step at a time, I'll reclaim that path. It wasn't long before my phone began vibrating softly on the corner of the desk. It wasn't an urgent ringtone, but a steady stream of silent notifications. I picked it up to take a look. The back end of the secondhand app showed orders marking as completed. The Rolex watches I had listed were being sold off one after another. I set the phone back down on the desk, not in any rush to figure out how to blow the cash. Instead, I stared at the drone blueprints and technical specs, flickering on my screen as a solid plan took shape. No panic, no haste, and no empty slogans. From this moment on, everything I lost abandoned, or let slip away, I'm bringing it all back home. At 6:30 in the evening, I finished reconciling all the transfers from the app. Over $1 million from the Rolex sales was sitting safely in my account. I hadn't spent a single cent of it yet, as I already had a specific destination for the funds, based on the entries in the original owner's diary. Today marks our wedding anniversary. I headed straight into the kitchen. Today is different. I had specifically bought extra groceries this morning, and now I began pulling them out one by one. A fresh sea bass, clean shrimp, crisp stalks of broccoli, shiitake mushrooms with greens, a small cut of premium ham, and some pork ribs with corn for a slow-simmered soup. The rhythmic sound of chopping soon echoed in the tiny kitchen. It wasn't fast, I took my time, But every slice was steady: steamed sea bass, stir-fried shrimp, garlic broccoli, shiitake with greens, corn and pork rib soup, and a classic tomato and egg stir-fry. 6 dishes and a soup. It wasn't extravagant. It just wasn't extravagant, but it was more than enough to fill the small, worn-out dining table to the brim. No flickering candles, no expensive bouquets, and no forced sense of ceremony. I simply focused on making every dish clean and flavorful. The temperature was just right. Once everything was ready, I scrubbed the kitchen until it sparkled, dried my hands, and had barely sat on the sofa for 2 minutes before the door lock clicked softly. Wanling was home. She pushed the door open, her eyes habitually downcast, her face masked in the exhaustion of a long day. Her shoulders were tight with tension, still radiating that defensive aura from the outside world. But in the very next heartbeat, she froze in her tracks. The savory aroma of a home-cooked feast filled her senses. She looked up, her gaze landing on the dining table, and her pupils constricted in a flicker of pure shock. A spread of hot dishes was laid out perfectly, vibrant in color, inviting in scent, transforming this drab, cramped rental into a place that finally felt like a home. She stood at the threshold, unmoving for a long while. "Why did you cook so much?" Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with a trace of subtle bewilderment. I stood up, took her bag, and set it aside with a casual ease, my tone as natural as could be. "The repair money cleared today," I said, omitting any mention of the anniversary, any mention of my true intentions, or anything about the past. "So I just made a few extra dishes." Su Wanling didn't call me out, nor did she pry. She was the type to keep a meticulous digital diary. She simply swapped her shoes in silence, walked to the table, and sat down. Her eyes scanned the variety of dishes, from the steamed sea bass to the stir-fried shrimp, down to the corn and pork rib soup. Every single one was a dish she used to love, flavors the original owner had etched into his heart back when he was first pursuing her. She picked up her chopsticks, taking a piece of the delicate sea bass. The meat was tender and perfectly fresh, cooked to absolute perfection. She ate in a heavy contemplative silence. She silent as she saw. Bite after bite, without a trace of shock, without a display of emotion, and without revealing a single thought. She simply ate with more focus than usual, savoring it much slower, and finishing more than she ever had. I sat opposite her, a silent companion, offering no words and no prying stares, deliberately avoiding any scrutiny. Some moments lose their value the second they are spoken aloud. Halfway through the meal, she suddenly lifted her gaze slightly, her eyes lingering on my face for less than a second, before darting back down to her bowl. The tips of her ears flushed with a faint heat, so subtle it was practically invisible. She had realized it. She realized this wasn't just making a few extra dishes, realized the significance of today's date, and realized the deeper meaning behind this feast. She only managed a tiny, barely audible whisper. "It's delicious. Then eat your fill," I replied, sliding her favorite shrimp dish closer to her side, with the same calm, unruffled composure. Once finished, I stood up to clear the table. This time, Su Wanling didn't offer her usual "I'll do it." She simply remained seated in silence, watching my retreating back as I carried the plates into the kitchen. By the time I finished the dishes and emerged, she was still lingering on the sofa, her fingertips tracing the rim of her cup, as she stared out at the city's night sky, lost in a world of her own thoughts. The lamplight cascaded over her profile, softening the edges of the formidable CEO who ruled the capital. I placed a glass of warm water within her reach. "Get some rest." She let out a soft melodic hum, a sound as light and delicate as a feather. I headed toward the guest room, and was about to pull the door shut, when she suddenly spoke. "Wait." My eyes widened in slight surprise. Just as I was closing the door, my wrist was caught in a gentle, sudden grip. Su Wanling's fingertips felt cool against my skin, and the moment she made contact, she herself seemed to freeze in hesitation. She recoiled, instantly releasing her grip, yet she still managed to find her voice. "Come with me to a certain place tomorrow morning." I arched an eyebrow. "Where to?" She averted her gaze, her voice as transparent and fluid as water, yet laced with an almost imperceptible tension. "The Su family's board meeting." I understood immediately. She wasn't asking for my help. She was publicly defining my position, declaring that Chen Yu is Su Wanling's man, not some pathetic leech ready to bail at any moment. I gave a simple nod, refraining from prying. "Understood. I'll go with you." Early the following morning, Su Wanling donned a sharp, impeccably tailored black suit. She wore zero jewelry, her hair pulled back into a sleek, low ponytail, Her look was the definition of somber and professional. Yet the moment she stood there, she was once again the formidable monarch, who ruled over $1 billion empire, back perfectly straight, eyes clear and cold, elegance etched into her very bones. I wore a crisp, freshly ironed white shirt and black slacks. My posture was upright, my aura calm and steady. Standing side by side, we were still a pair, radiating a presence so blindingly intense that no one could look away. The meeting was held in an old money skyscraper downtown, inside a standard executive suite. The atmosphere was frigid as ice the moment we stepped in. The room was packed with old foxes, aggressive creditors, partners who had stabbed her in the back, and industry rivals eagerly waiting to watch her crash and burn. As the door swung open, every single gaze snapped toward us like a volley of arrows, landing first on the bankrupted Su Wanling, before pinning themselves maliciously onto me. No one dared to utter the word leech out loud, but those predatory glares, those suppressed sneering smirks, and that performative mock sympathy in their tone. Every single detail was meant to draw blood. Su Wanling sat down with absolute poise, completely unruffled. She placed a meticulously organized ledger softly onto the table, her movements retaining every bit of their habitual elegance. "Everyone is accounted for," she noted. "So let us begin." Her voice was frigid and crystal clear, instantly silencing the chaotic chatter of the room. "Before you are the accounts I have personally re-verified. There are 3 instances of duplicate platform service fees, 1 error in the calculation of overdue interest, and 2 remaining supply chain balances that were settled prior to the bankruptcy liquidation. The vouchers simply hadn't been archived yet." Her finger tapped the paper with surgical precision. "Debts that are rightfully mine I will settle to the last cent. But for those that are not, I will not pay a single penny more." The moment her words fell, a middle-aged man opposite us slammed his palm against the wood. His tone was heavy with intimidation. "President Su, don't give us that talk. The contract was signed in black and white. Now you claim it was a calculation error. Are we just supposed to eat the loss?" Another associate in glasses chimed in with a sneer. "We're running a small operation here. Now that the Su Corporation has collapsed, our entire cash flow has been severed. If you don't give us a concrete solution today, this meeting isn't going anywhere." Someone pointedly glanced at me with a mocking smirk. "Besides, President Su doesn't exactly have anyone reliable by her side. If we don't pressure you, who else are we supposed to pressure?" The implication was loud and clear. It was a direct poisonous jab at me. "What can your husband do besides leech off your success, Inwaki?" Su Wanling's brow twitched with irritation, just as she was about to lash back. I took a calm half-step forward, positioning myself slightly ahead of her. My gaze landed steadily on the ledger. I didn't acknowledge the room. I simply spoke in a neutral tone, low but piercingly clear. "Mr. Lee, you mentioned the contract was black and white. Then let's follow the contract to the letter." Su Wanling tried to interject, but I reached out and firmly gripped her hand. As an engineer, a hypersensitivity to numbers is hardwired into my soul. With just a single glance at those figures, I knew that string of late fees was crooked. I snatched a pen and began calculating rapidly on paper, the scratch of the nib against the surface, sounding like a jagged blade in the silent room. "Mr. Zhang, the daily interest rate you're claiming is 24% annually." I halted my pen, lifting my gaze to meet his, my expression chillingly calm. "I may be a tech guy, but I know the current legal protection limit cannot exceed 4 times the LPR. That caps out at exactly 15.4%. I tapped the glaring digits on the paper. "If you insist on squeezing that extra 8.6% out of us, Weiss, we'll settle this in court instead. At that point, even your principal might need an audit. Furthermore, regarding this supply chain balance, the bank statements and signed receipts all exist. The funds were transferred ages ago. Trying to bill us a second time is nothing short of double dipping. You're all experienced businessmen. You should be able to do the math better than me. President Su isn't dodging her debts. She's only paying what is legally owed." Just as the tension began to slightly thaw, a man who had been lurking in the corner suddenly leaned forward with a menacing, hollow smirk. "President Su, I don't give a damn about anyone else's tab. My debt must be settled in cold hard cash today." Su Wanling looked over, her voice remaining composed. "Mr. Wang, your payment is scheduled in the first phase next month. Don't play games with me." The man cut her off with a sneer, slamming the table. "I want my 500,000 right now. If it's short by a penny, I'll have men blockading your door. Let's see how much your reputation is worth then." It was a blatant, ugly threat. Everyone leaned in waiting to see. Su Wanling crumbled under the humiliation. Her fingertips tightened, her complexion turning a shade paler. She truly didn't have that kind of liquidity on hand. My hand hanging at my side twitched slightly. The Rolex sale proceeds had just hit my account, providing a perfect pool of liquid capital. That was supposed to be my seed money for the new start. Yet in this moment, I didn't even flinch. I stepped forward, shielding Su Wanling with my body, and locked my gaze on Mr. Wang. "500,000, right? Yeah, said he." The man let out a derisive snort. his eyes scanning me with pure disdain. What's this? You the little house pet. Want to pay for her? Do you even have the cash? I ignored his petty insults, simply pulling out my smartphone, my fingers flying across the screen, transferring now. A few minutes later, the crisp chime of a bank notification sliced through the heavy silence of the boardroom. The man glanced at his phone, his face instantly paling. 500,000, not a cent short. The entire room was stunned into silence. Su Wanling whipped her head around to stare at me, her eyes filled with utter bewilderment. She immediately tugged at my sleeve, hissing in a low voice, "Where did you get that money? This isn't right." I leaned in and gently squeezed her hand, whispering in a tone meant only for her ears. "It's the watch money. Use it for now. You can pay me back later." Her fingers trembled, and the way she looked at me completely shifted. I turned my attention back to Mr. Wang, my voice calm, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "The money is yours. Sign the receipt now. If you ever dare to harass her again, don't blame me for getting nasty." The man clutched his phone speechless, his arrogant bravado extinguished in an instant. He could only sign and fingerprint the document in shame. "The remaining accounts will be settled as discussed. Legitimate debts won't be delayed by a second, but I won't yield an inch to unreasonable demands." The meeting was finally under control. As the crowd began to disperse, the glares they threw us were now laced with genuine wariness. Su Wanling stood up, her posture regaining its elegant, dignified poise. She gave me a slight, subtle nod before heading toward the restroom. I stayed behind to organize the paperwork, but as I turned to leave, a shadow slanted across my path. Lin Jaewon. He was leaning against the wall. His bespoke designer suit made him look every bit the elite, a mocking, half-hearted smirk playing on his lips. His gaze drifted lazily across my figure, as light and dismissive as if he were staring at a stray ant. The few lingering bystanders in the room instantly slowed their pace in perfect unison, feigning to organize their belongings, while their ears perked up in anticipation, eager to witness a spicy drama unfold. You and she were never on the same level. Before you lived off her wealth, now you live off her reputation. Standing there right beside her, Zhao Shao Suite. Don't you feel even a shred of shame? If I were you, I'd have vanished long ago. Just to stop being such a dead weight. Open your eyes and look at the reality. The only one who can drag her out of this abyss is me. The one who can provide the resources, restore her dignity, and fuel her comeback is me. She and I belong to the same world, while you're nothing more than a redundant burden, clinging to her while she's down." As his words hung in the air, the chill in his smile deepened, radiating a condescending air of charity and dismissal. He didn't use a single profanity, nor did he explicitly call me a leech, yet every syllable he uttered was designed to weaponize the stereotype people have of me. It was a venomous surgical strike that left no room for retort. I slowly lifted my gaze, devoid of any rage, untouched by panic, and showing none of the pathetic vulnerability he expected. Instead, the warmth in my eyes bled away, turning as calm and cold as a sheet of black ice. "Whatever happens between us is none of an outsider's business." The contemptuous smirk on his face widened, and he took another aggressive half-step closer, his tone dripping with the absolute certainty of a winner. He lowered his voice, driving every word like a stake into my chest. "You don't actually believe that she and I are just ordinary friends, do you? Wanling and I grew up together. We're childhood sweethearts who know everything about each other. What she loved as a kid, what she loathed, how she reacts when she's backed into a corner. I understand her 100 times better than you ever will. When she was at the peak of her glory, you were just a parasite reaching for cash. Now that she's fallen, you're nothing but a useless obstacle in her way. How do you even begin to compete with me? The person she truly trusts by her side has always been me. You're just a decorative relic from her high school days." A total joke. As those words landed, the surrounding eavesdroppers gasped in unison. Childhood sweethearts. If that's the case, then today's drama is the real deal, coming to kick the leech to the curb. Every gaze turned toward me with predatory excitement, pinning me like needles. My eyes grew colder, yet I remained completely unfazed. Childhood sweethearts. Do you really think I haven't seen the original owner's diary? Or that old faded photo from the high school field? Su Wanling's youth was defined by her icy solitude, and the only person ever by her side was Chen Yu. It had absolutely zero to do with the man standing before me. I was just about to speak, when a cold, indifferent voice rang out from behind me. It wasn't loud, yet it instantly crushed all the background noise. "I don't recall ever having a shared childhood history with you." Everyone whipped their heads around. Su Wanling stood a short distance away, her posture flawlessly elegant and upright. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders, her expression calm and devoid of any emotion. Yet the sheer aura radiating from her bones brought the entire hallway to a dead silence the moment she appeared. "You were never part of my high school inner circle. I didn't truly meet you until a business gala in university. By then, we were already adults. As for the phrase childhood sweethearts, young Master Lin, I'd suggest you stop throwing it around so recklessly. If word gets out, people will only laugh. At your need to fabricate basic acquaintances. As her final word fell, a collective gasp echoed through the corridor. The smug, confident grin on Lin Jae-won's face instantly froze, turning into a mask of pure shock and absolute excruciating humiliation. He never imagined in a million years that Su Wanling would strip him of his dignity so publicly. She didn't leave him a single shred of face. She had utterly shredded his facade, leaving him completely exposed. I stood there on the sidelines, with only one thought in my mind. Keep faking it. Did you really think no one has a memory? The smug grin on Lin Jae-won's face instantly paralyzed, his complexion shifting between a pale green and a ghostly white. Under the collective gaze of the room, he was losing his cool. But he quickly forced back that arrogant, winning expression, and took a slow, deliberate step forward, lowering his voice significantly, yet ensuring those nearby could hear every syllable, dripping with his sense of superiority. Fine. Even if we aren't childhood sweethearts, so what? I'm here today to offer her a lifeline. The Lin family is prepared to inject 300 million in capital to revitalize her remaining projects and assets. Resources, connections, channels all pave the entire way for her. All she has to do is give the word, and by tomorrow she'll be back on her throne. I can provide her a return to the summit. All you can offer her is a cramped rental, some cheap noodles, and this pathetic sentimental nonsense. You aren't even fit to shine her shoes. To the current Su Wanling, this was effectively a golden life raft. Everyone present assumed she would undoubtedly accept, that she had no choice but to accept. Lin Jae-won crossed his arms, his face etched with absolute certainty. He was banking on her breaking point, betting that she would bow her head for the cash, convinced that she would. Abandon me, the husband with nothing to his name. I slowly lifted my gaze, showing not a shred of panic, but only a cold, quiet resolve. Just as I was about to speak, I felt as though a lump had formed in my throat, struggling to find a valid counter-argument. 300 million, the chips Lin Jae-won threw on the table, hit my heart like a massive boulder. I clenched my fist so tightly that my nails nearly pierced my palms. Logic told me that if she agreed, Su Wanling could skip 10 years of brutal struggle, and I could complete my mission and return to my own world. It seemed like a win-win, but looking at her stubbornly straight back, my heart felt as if it were being carved by a dull knife. I can't let this happen. I could accept failing the mission and being trapped here forever, but I refused to let her sacrifice the radiance that rightfully belongs to her for my sake. From behind me, that cool and elegant voice once again resonated softly through the hall. Su Wanling approached us step by step without haste, without a hint of panic, and without the slightest tremor of temptation at the mention of money. Her back was perfectly straight, her eyes clear and sharp. She was still the queen who had fallen from the clouds, but whose indomitable spirit remained unbroken. She reached my side, not even glancing at Lin Jae-won, and naturally slipped her arm through mine. The movement was poised, her posture was unwavering, and her allegiance was crystal clear. Only then did she slowly raise her gaze to meet Lin Jae-won's, her stare calm and level, void of anger or bitterness, carrying only an innate sense of detachment and nobility. I appreciate young Master Lin's kind offer. 300 million is indeed a staggering sum, enough to make almost anyone bow their head. As a smug grin began to spread across Lin Jae-won's face, Su Wanling's next words instantly pulverized his sense of superiority. But even if I, Su Wanling, have fallen into the mud, I will never use someone else's charity to stand back up. Things are difficult now, but I have my strength, my team, and my principles. The expression on Lin Jae-won's face froze completely, shifting from triumph to shock, then to utter humiliation, until he turned deathly pale. His prideful capital, his elite family background, and his $300 million bargaining chip, before her declaration of independence, had become as pathetic as a bad joke. Su Wanling didn't grant him another look, tugging gently on my arm, maintaining her elegant and dignified grace. She turned and walked away. We walked side by side down the corridor. She was cool and proud, and I was steady and reliable. Even in our current state of poverty, we radiated a brilliance that made others avert their eyes. Lin Jae-won stood frozen in his tracks, becoming the ultimate laughingstock in everyone's eyes. The elevator door slid shut with a low hum. In the cramped space, there were only the two of us, yet she didn't release her grip on my arm. Her profile was calm and soft, but a faint rosy flush began to creep across her ears. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice as delicate as a feather. "Thank you for just now." I glanced down at her hand linked with mine and whispered, "I should be the one thanking you. Thank you for not letting me lose." She looked up at me, the icy distance in her eyes finally melting away, as she gave a subtle, soft smile. It was like the first thaw of spring. The elevator descended slowly, carrying us toward the light.